My name is Sibbi Bernhardsson and I'm professor of violin at Oberlin Conservatory. I want to discuss the left hand a little bit, and the name of the topic today is strength through balance. The strong left hand through balance. Now, like I mentioned when I was talking about the natural born, everything being based on the détaché stroke in the born, it's helpful to think about that everything in the left hand is based on the octave frame. And again, I want to sort of talk about how we can find the natural hand position, because in order to have great technique, we have to be comfortable. We cannot be comfortable we cannot have great technique if we're not comfortable. So we have to allow our hands and fingers to move and be set up in a certain way that is natural, and natural to the way our hand wants to function. So one thing that I find very helpful is if you just sort of shake your left hand for a little bit and then just kind of go into playing position, and then I shake the hand a little bit, then I just sort of like stop. And what happens, if you'll see, is it sort of lands in this position. And this is actually, this feels comfortable, and there's no tension in my left hand when I do this. And if you can see, if I go a little closer, you can see that my knuckles are curved, and then I'm able to then move, for instance, my fourth finger from this knuckle here, which is the strongest knuckle of the hand. Now, we need to then translate this hand position into when we play the violin here. And what is helpful after we've done this is then what is very helpful in order to keep sort of the balance in the left hand is if we can start thinking about the relationship between your elbow and your fingertips. So if you can see, if I put my first finger down and put my second finger down and third finger and fourth finger, in the subtlest of ways, my elbow moves. So there's a relationship between the fingertip, each finger, and my elbow. Because if it doesn't, if I don't move my elbow, look what happens to my hand position, which was not natural, does not look like how my hand wants to be. So it's critical that we keep this very fluid. It's subtle, it's small, but it's there. And it's important that we have that so we can constantly be releasing tension. Now, what you will also notice when you started this way, shaking your hand, is sort of the fingernails. If you look at your fingernails, they're all kind of facing you. And when I put my hands on the fingerboard, you'll see that happens as well. And when this happens, you actually end up putting your finger, what many people, and I certainly do as well, call playing on the inside of the finger, which is on sort of the right hand part of the fingertip, which will then help you play with a more centered intonation because it covers kind of smaller space. But more importantly, that's where your hand naturally and your fingers want to go. So I don't like force my hand to be on the inside of the finger. It actually happens there naturally. So that would be the first thing that I want to stress, the importance of the relationship between the fingertip and the elbow everywhere you play. So when I'm playing on the E string versus the G string, 7th position, 5th position, my elbow moves subtly. Now what this then also helps me is keeping the same hand frame in all positions. So when I'm playing first position, or if I'm playing 7th position, see, it looks and feels the same, but the difference, of course, is the spaces get smaller as you get higher. So the best way to develop this, I find, is by practicing double stops in general, but particularly practicing octaves. And I find that if everything in the bow arm comes from the détaché stroke, is related to the détaché stroke, then I find that everything in the left hand is derived or comes from the octave. So if I have, good, solid, comfortable octaves, I have a good left hand. Because my hand frame should not change first through basically 7th position. The distances get smaller. So there's one very simple exercise that I like to do in all position that addresses all of this. And it simply goes like this. I just play 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And I play an octave. And what I think about here is then the relationship between the fingertips and the elbow. So I can think about that. Then I like to play the octave so I can get the hand frame. And then when I get the octave, I make sure that every part of my hand releases. And I even do like little exercises, funny things like I just move my thumb around. Then I just do the same thing, but I move to 2nd position. 2nd position. And do you see I stay on the inside of the finger? My fingernails are kind of facing me. So when you do this, you should think about that. And then the relationship between the fingertips and the elbow. So my hand frame never ever changes. So when I'm in 6th position, you see this relationship here. It looks and definitely feels the same as when I'm playing in 1st position. Now, what is also critical to keep in mind is that we should always be very surprised actually how light our left hand is. Now, I don't find it particularly helpful. It certainly hasn't helped me, and I don't think it helps my students when I tell them to relax. Because I remember when I was a student and playing a master class or something, and people said, oh, just relax. I actually got more tight. But what helps me is thinking about releasing. So as soon as I strike a finger, I almost in a subtle way think that there's a little forte piano in my fingertips, right? So I'm constantly, as soon as I strike the string, I release the fingers. So I'm never holding in any tension when I'm playing. And this will then help me be able to vibrate because I'm never holding on to the fingerboard in any way. So to recap, the hand we should find when we're looking for a hand frame, we look for the natural position that your hand goes. So it's good to shake your hand, playing position. My hand happens to land about here. Yours may look a little different, but for the most part, most hands fall about here. And then you see that your knuckles are slightly curved. And then you can see that the fingernails are kind of facing your face. And then we try to emulate that when we put our violin up. And what's going to help us keep this hand frame, this natural hand frame, is when there's a relationship between the fingertip and the elbow. Because if you don't move your elbow, we lose this hand position. So your elbow moves subtly in accordance to which finger is down, right? And then we are going to try to maintain, we're not going to try, we're actually going to maintain the same hand frame and hand position first through 7th position. Then we are going to make sure that our hand always feels surprisingly light. And the best way to feel light is by thinking about releasing fingers. Not by necessarily relaxing, but by releasing fingers, so you're never holding on to anything. And then I'm going to recommend that you do my very simple, basic sort of finger setting octave exercise that goes like this, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3 octave. So you can focus on hand frame, relationship between the fingertip and the elbow. We're going to do that in all positions. 2nd position next. All the way up to 7th position and then back down. Thank you very much.